So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for the final virtual session for this year. This is our Q&A and panel discussion. We'll have Mel Asher, Betsy Dudash, Al Murphy, and Liz Jackson are all here with us tonight. So I think all of you have probably been at one of the other sessions and heard a little bit about who we are and what we do. I'm Amanda with Cascadia Conservation District. So I'll just give you the brief version tonight. So we're a non-regulatory organization. We work throughout Chelan County to encourage wise stewardship of conservation and all natural resources. We are governed by a board of supervisors, and our staff members also work cooperatively with local landowners and communities. And we're able to provide technical and financial assistance in several different areas of natural resources, including soil, water, forest, fish, and wildlife conservation. Go ahead, Kirk. So again, just a little more detail on the types of specific projects that we offer, and that we always love to hear from the public. And if we don't have a program that fits your specific need, we're happy to connect you with a partner. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. Website's down there and the phone number. And yeah, we hope to hear from you soon. And I'll turn it over to Kirk to introduce the process for tonight.
We're just going to jump right into it this evening. So we had a number of people submitted questions for the panelists. And so we're going to start working our way through those questions. I have on the slides, which you can see there. But what we're going to try to do is if you have questions specifically related to these at this point, throw those into the chat. We'll try to make it as much of an informal discussion as we can, and to really try to meet your specific needs at your properties. So had some people submitted questions for anybody on the panel, and we had some that were targeted to some of the speakers. But so we'll just kind of jump back and forth between different ones. So this first set of questions for everybody. So is there a one-page shopping list of plants with characteristics, needs, pros and cons to take to a nursery when you go shopping? So we'll just start with that one. Anybody want to jump in right off the bat? Betsy, you were already talking about this.
Yeah, so I actually have an Excel spreadsheet that I would happily share with anyone. You guys can't see it, but it's got a lot of information, and it can be, you could use it and then customize it for your own landscape needs or your own plant needs. But it has plant names, height, shade tolerance, exposure, drought tolerance, flower color, approximate bloom time, et cetera, et cetera. Most of which I got from the Derby Canyon website. So thank you. But just in a format that I can use for clients, and I also share with my students, so they can everybody can customize it to their own needs. So happy to share that, and I would send it to Kirk, and he could get it out to you guys. And I think one of my students last year added a pros and cons. No, I added a pros and cons tab, which might still be there. And also, it's possible there are hyperlinks for pictures in one version of it. I'll have to check, but yeah, happy to share that.
Yeah, and I would add that the Columbia Basin chapter of the Washington Native Plant Society has a great one-pager list. It's a little bit more focused for lower elevation areas like the Wenatchee area, as opposed to Leavenworth or Plain. But you go to their website, you can download that, and it's got all of that information on it, and kind of a basic cheat sheet for some of the lower elevation native plants to include in landscapes.
Great.
And one thing to add to that too. So I'll put a link in the chat for the Heritage Garden website. There's a resources tab, and so the Excel file might be similar to the Columbia Basin that Mel referenced, but I'll put it in the chat for everyone. And I think Betsy sounds like it has more information than this one, but yeah, it's not comprehensive, and there's a lot more of the lower elevation plants on there.
Yeah, and then if I can just add is, I think as we talked about throughout the class here, is we got different zones. We got the mixed conifer zone up above, the dry forest ponderosa pine, and the sage steppe. And so I think it's real important to keep in mind where you put the plant to make sure you got the right plant in the right spot. And one of the things that I would also add is there is a book available on the Chelan County Master Gardener website, which Kirk is going to type into the chat, the URL for that. And it would give you lots of information on the attributes of plants and where they might best be planted around your home, as far as in what landscape zones. So that's something to keep in mind. And also it talks about the xeric as far as the water wise, if they're this book points out if they're water, they require a lot of water or little water. So you can get that information off that.
So that may be more than one page shopping list. But
Oh, it's definitely more than one page.
all of yours.
Yeah.
But some good resources. All right. So second question, you can all see it, but what are some native plants with good winter visual interest?
There's a lot. I was gonna say, there's a lot. So number one, the red osier dogwood, if you want it for winter interest, you have to learn how to prune it properly. Otherwise, the stems fade and they lose that red color. And in a nutshell, you want to cut the oldest stems at the bottom of the plant as they lose their color, and that'll control the size and control the color. And I have a few more for that list. I love hawthorns, as you know, so if you can grow hawthorns, that's a great one. Kinnikinick is, evergreen, so until it's covered with snow, that's good. Ocean spray has beautiful bark and it's a beautiful plant. Let me see. Some of the grasses, but especially the taller grasses, I would say basin wild rye, it would be spectacular in the snow. Let me see what else. Oregon grape and the buckwheats, especially my love, the snow buckwheat, until it's completely buried under snow. But if it's a relatively dry winter with minimal snowfall, it'll look good all winter, more or less. So those are my choices.
Yeah, I would add Douglas maple also has a beautiful reddish stem. So for a smaller tree, not quite as vibrant as the red osier dogwood, but we were sorting some today in the nursery, and side by side, they're both very, very red, almost burgundy, very beautiful stem color.
If you want to see some beautiful vegetation in as far as a tree, if you want to, ponderosa pine changes its characteristic in the snow so much. If you go out and look in the forest, I'm not suggesting planting these in your yard or whatever, but if you want to see some beautiful vegetation, I don't think there's anything more beautiful than a big old ponderosa pine stand with the big, the big pumpkin diameters with fresh snow on them. So I would suggest, if you want to see that, drive up the Entiat after a fresh snow sometime, and it is absolutely gorgeous to look at. Totally change of feeling. Instead of the dry forest, now it just becomes an absolutely beautiful forest.
Another one, I don't think you said it, my thought was snowberry. I don't know
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then personally, I like the way rabbit brush looks in the winter too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then my other suggestion would be some of the willows, just with that color contrast, depending if you like more of the reds with the yellows. And then to play off, if there's room for some trees, aspens, water birch, cottonwood, and then red cedars. Just some other ideas I had.
All right. And what do y'all think about ag strength vinegar for weed control?
Yeah, I'm not aware of an agricultural strength vinegar spray. I've used just, domestically obtained vinegar spray. It works great. Any of that type of vinegar spray is going to be effective as a contact herbicide. There's two different types of herbicides. Contact herbicides that kill the vegetation that it comes into contact with, and systemic herbicides that are taken into the plant and translocated and are really effective on controlling root systems. So vinegar is a contact spray, so it would be okay at controlling annuals. You have to apply it pretty heavily, at least the ones that I've used. But again, I'm not familiar with the agricultural strength version. I don't know, Al, you look like you were kind of nodding, or have you
Yeah.
ever heard of that
Well,
product?
You are absolutely correct, Mel, is that regular vinegar in its dilute form, most of it's about a 3% to 5% concentration, is very ineffective. But there are some agricultural strength, and I don't know what the percent, the molar, if you will, is of those
They're
strengths.
about 20%.
Is that what they
Oh.
are?
Yeah.
Okay, then they would probably be effective.
Yeah.
But when it's down in the single digit number, it's not effective at all.
But I mean, again, it's only going to work on an annual. It's not going to attack the roots. It's going to kill the top growth.
Right.
If it's a perennial weed, it's just going to pop right back up. So just keep that in mind.
All right. Sandra asked, and I'm not sure if she's online here, but about recommendations for shade tolerant natives. And Theo's also asking about shade tolerant natives. So Sandra's specifically about what do you plant around zone 1 without much sun. And then what Theo's asking about there for under deciduous trees.
Well, I can kick that off, and I know you guys can beef that. In fact, why don't you go for that, Betsy?
Okay. So the caveat with this is obviously, especially under deciduous trees, there's two things that might need to happen. Limbing up to get a little bit more sun if you can, and then understanding that plants in competition with tree roots are gonna need extra water. So that's like from the get-go. But then given that, but 1 to 2 hours of sun a day is pretty darn shady. So you could try plants. I would try spreading dogbane, the red columbine, the native columbine, and actually goat's beard. But goat's beard, is fabulous shade plant, but it loves water. I mean, it loves water. So you really, if you're going to do that, have to commit to, yes, extra irrigation and a lot of it. I mean, it's beautiful. So, and then under the shade tolerant trees, I would probably try some kinnikinick again on the perimeter. So not in the deep shade, but again, limb up to help get some more daylight in there. And the creeping Oregon grape, because that's a full shade plant. So that's probably the best bet there. Snowberry, fairly shade tolerant, not in the heavy shade, but in a lot of other shady scenarios. Again, spreading dogbane and pine grass. But that again will need some extra water. Some of those will need some extra water, but they're worth trying. Al, your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I agree with what you said there. One of the things about pine grass, which is a great grass for up close, you need to keep it manicured, if you will, somewhat, and it will stay green most of the year if you just add a little bit of water to it. And again, it depends on what zone you're in. If you're up at the high stuff or the ponderosa pine, trying to grow it out in the sage steppe is kind of a challenge. It may not be the best place for it. In fact, out in the sage steppe, if you move out towards that, one grass that I really like because it is so versatile and does a lot of different things, and that is Sandberg's bluegrass. It is a good grass it only gets about 6 to 8 inches tall for the most part. It will take some steps, compaction around it, and it grows in every type of soil you can possibly think of. It grows in the lithosols, and it even grows in the clays and the loams and what have you. But it takes a little bit to get it established. Once established, I've seen some areas where it is still in the same place that it was planted after or during World War II over in by Soap Lake, where they had machine gun training, and they just tore the area up and they went back in and seeded it with Sandberg's bluegrass right after the war, and it's still there. It's beautiful right now. So it's one, and it took some a fair amount of abuse, if you will.
Al, how shade tolerant is that though? Because most bluegrasses like the sun, don't they?
It is somewhat shade tolerant. The reason I say that, because it does well under a semi-closed canopy of sagebrush. Okay. It doesn't grow great now, but I mean it, and I'm trying to think of around a home, only 1 to 2 hours of sunlight a day. That's hard to do, you know. I think
that's the north side of my house. You know, it's that the 5 or 6 foot no man's land, you know, next to the property line. And yeah, it's
you only
really
get
hard.
about 1 to 2 hours.
It gets early morning sun from the east, which is the back of the house, and then late afternoon from the west, which is the front of the house.
Yeah.
So it's indirect sun at 2 different times a day, but it's pretty shady.
Well, that's, you know, what I was thinking of. Rather being shade is kind of, a lot of that is more or less, and my thinking would be indirect sunlight. Okay. And so it's really not shade. It's more of a indirect sunlight.
The dappled or indirect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I suggest that experimentation is probably going to be your best bet to figure out what works for that situation, because the shade plants here are tricky given the dry conditions.
One of the plants you brought up, Mel, was yarrow. Yarrow's got a wide variety of growth capabilities. It's a good, again, it would do best in the sunlight, open sunlight, but depending on where you're at and what your soils are, yarrow might be doing fairly well in there also.
All right. Anything else?
I guess it's more of a question for the panel. What about pussy toes, or rock cress, or even wild strawberries?
Pussy toes definitely wants full sun. Rock cress, I don't know. And
Probably
wild
full sun
strawberry.
too.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah,
not good option.
I think the wild strawberry might take some shade, but not what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
I
They're
have
about
to
a fif-
grow. I have to grow wild strawberries in a shade, under shade at the nursery. They appear to be too delicate to grow in full sun in Shaston anyway. So I think that would be something to try again, like
Yeah.
Betsy, experiment with it, try a few things and see what thrives.
I agree with that. I think, you know, strawberries would be a great plant to try. In fact, what you could, one could do is start some seed in the house, and, you know, just little cups, and get them going inside the house, and so that you're not just throwing seed out on the ground and getting it well established before you turn it loose.
Right, true, good point.
All right, let's jump on the next one. And so Sarah sent in this picture and wants to know what to do with this small bunch of patch of grass.
Is Sarah here?
No. Sarah, are you here? Speak up if you are, or send something in the chat.
Yes, we're here.
There she is.
Okay.
Oh,
Yep.
so my question is, I look at that and in order to figure out what to do with it, we really need to know the exposure, and do you have irrigation, and kind of what are your goals? Because just at first glance, I would say plant a pollinator garden, but I don't know how that's integrated with the rest of your landscape. Are you going to need to put stepping stones through that? Because if you had lawn and you get rid of the lawn, you still might need access to places.
An access
So-
area. It's just kind of a small patch in front of our house that we aren't really going to use much. And so
Mhm.
trying to figure like a really low maintenance.
Something that would be pretty, most of the yard that we use is behind the house. So that is just a small patch that we have to take care of up there, but we don't use it.
And is it mostly sunny, or, I mean, in this picture it's partly shaded. So
It
what's
gets
the,
it gets a fair bit of sun.
like afternoon, the hot sun?
It's on the east side of the house.
Yeah.
So that I took that picture probably at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
So I would tend, because of the eastern exposure, I would tend to be a little bit more careful about using some of the shrub steppe natives that they really want to bake in that hot sun. They want more of that. But you know, it depends on how much sun there is. But so I would tend to go with a mix, maybe further out, maybe, you know, put the tougher ones that want more sun, and closer to the house, throw in some things like showy daisy or some of the other plants that can take some shade and look great. But I think a pollinator garden would be, I mean, it's like a perfect spot. If you're not going to use it, just let the insects and the birds and everybody kind of have at it.
Okay.
Did you guys have any other specific questions about how to replace it, or?
Yeah. Probably more than we have time for. We're just getting started. So
Is it currently irrigated? Is there an irrigation system?
yeah, it
Okay.
is. Yep.
Well, if you don't have a neighborhood association that's gonna get on your back like they've done to some of my clients, just don't turn the irrigation on this spring in that area and let it die. And then you can then plant into that dead area in the
Oh,
fall.
yeah, I see.
Yeah.
But you know, depends on the neighborhood. You might not get away with it. Or if it dies and you have to be careful about how it looks, maybe just put down a really thin layer of mulch. Just like, I mean, just a thin layer, like an inch, just so it looks neat. And then I would plan on fall planting, because that's more, less stressful. You'll have greater success.
Okay.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's any number of plants that you could use. I mean, and just sketch it up and figure out what you like, what colors you like, and throw in some grasses as well, and maybe some rabbit brush. And I think, you know, be great.
Okay.
Yeah, I think my suggestion too, on top of that, would be just avoid some of the rhizonomous, more aggressive plants, just because it's a small space. Maybe avoiding like the roses, woods rose, Nootka rose. Let's see what else. The
No
bottle
milkweed.
squirrel tail. Yeah. Yeah. So just the ones that might spread. So maybe no yarrow too on this spot.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with the pollinator garden for sure.
Now, Al, because it's right by the house there, what firewise criteria would you suggest they follow?
Yeah, I think that I ran to get a book.
Oh,
Out of
that's a
the
good
other
one.
room while you were talking. It's called Sagebrush Country, a wildflower sanctuary. Okay, and it is just full of wonderful plants, natives, that would be acceptable. The thing that I would be nervous of and stress not to do is those look like junipers, not too far away. Is that what those are? I'm not sure. Those trees, Sarah?
Well, not great with the kind of trees.
Okay, but anyway, you know, one thing I might encourage you to do is prune those up a little bit, and so you don't have them all the way down to the ground. And then I would kind of stay away from some of the finer shrubs and up close to the house. So I would go with stuff that stays less than a foot tall, and go with a lot of perennials and annuals to start off with.
Mhm.
Herbaceous perennials and annuals. Yeah.
You get some treaties, Louisia, tucked in along the side of your house there,
Oh, yeah.
that eastern exposure. Oh, it'd be beautiful.
Yeah.
The neighbors will all
Yeah.
be jealous. They'll be like, hey, what is that? I must have some. Yeah. It's such a
What was the
beautiful
name of that
plant.
again?
Tweeties Louisia. It's a showpiece.
Louisia. I didn't catch the first word. The second word was Louisia. What's the first one?
Tweeties. Tweedys.
Okay.
A botanist's last name, Tweedy.
Ah, okay.
And Liz just put it in the chat.
You know, one of the things that we were talking about earlier before we started is if you need access through there, it would be kind of cool, just as an idea, just looking at it, you might be able to build a little rock pathway and make it look like a dry stream bed.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like at the Wenatchee Valley College.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I like your scoria, the red rock you have out in front with some basalt sticking in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for all the suggestions.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. So these were specific for Mel. That drought tolerant and alternative lawns and clover, and clover's already in the lawn. You know, can you just add it to the lawn? What do you have to do? And then how do you replace a lawn that's over maple tree roots?
So the question of the clover, I don't know much about intentionally growing clover in my yard. It's always a species that creeps in on its own. The clovers that I'm familiar with are not drought tolerant though. You know, they're potentially, you could find a species that is, but they're competitive with the amount of irrigation that, you know, a standard bluegrass, ryegrass lawn requires. So I guess I'm not aware of what species of clover you would use to get some of that drought tolerance. I mean, you would get diversity, and you'd have pollen sources mostly for European honeybees, but you know, there's that. But the question of overseeding, you likely are going to need to create some bare soil. Doesn't have to be 100%, but it should be a good, you know, a good 30 to 50%. And whether you can just go into bare spots or spots where the lawn isn't doing as well and try to work in those areas. I don't know how else to create bare soil other than maybe trying, like Betsy had suggested, trying the plug, like the aeration type approach, and kind of taking out little plugs of the lawn and spreading some soil on the surface, and being able to create some bare soil to seed into. So yeah, I mean, if you want to interseed anything, you've got to open up space physically, and then, you know, you got to reduce the competition from the grasses. So yeah, I think it would be doable. It'd be a little bit of work, but I don't know. Betsy, do you have any experience with clover lawns? Particularly?
No, except a lot of people talk about them, and I like to point out that most of the clovers are non-native. So
Right.
it's just kind of replacing one issue with another. However, when you were talking about the lawn replacement a few weeks ago, Mel, the
Yeah.
blue grandma grass, I'm pretty sure you can buy it in plugs. So that kind of scenario where you would plug in a more drought tolerant grass is not beyond the pale. I think it could work. And then over time, as you cut back on irrigating, would allow those to compete
Yeah.
better and spread and take over. So
that'd be
that's
neat.
one option. Yeah. Or with the plug, I think if you have a lawn, it should be healthy, and the core aeration is a great way to do it. And you would rake compost into those holes. And then again, if you throw in some of the native fescue blends that you talked about, and let the
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh,
You froze up, Betsy.
Betsy, you there?
different, right? And if you can starve the bluegrass of enough water, it'll eventually become less
Yeah.
competitive.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Yeah, just kind of slowly plugging in the drought tolerant species and tapering back the water. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. The question about the replacing a lawn growing over maple tree roots, I'm assuming that the tree roots are really shallow and poking up across the surface, or
Yeah,
I didn't
Thea,
quite
are you
understand this
here?
question.
Thea,
Yeah,
are you
she's
here?
here.
Hi, I'm here. Yeah, so we bought our house and there's a big established maple tree in our front yard, right dead in the middle of it. And it's great, it's beautiful, but it does have like really shallow roots all throughout the little patch of lawn that I'm hoping to take the grass out of. And so I've been looking into like covering with cardboard potential, but don't want to ruin the tree. I know that the tree will need water as well. So just trying to kind of figure out how much water it needs
Can
and
you
how to
water
plant.
it? Can you water it like via drip, like on another side, or is it just right smack dab in the middle of the
It's in the
area?
middle.
Okay. Yeah, so droughting the area out will be a challenge for sure. Yeah, I don't know how much cardboard or mulch would you recommend using in that scenario, Betsy?
So with tree roots, it sounds like it's either a silver maple or a red maple, because they tend to have pretty shallow root systems. And those are both hydrophilic species. They love water. But the issue here is there's a couple of issues. One is that a big maple tree creates shade. So the lawn, turf grasses do not like shade. There's some that are more tolerant than other, but and the mulch. So what I would do is probably a physical removal of the existing turf grass will be the easiest. I mean, it won't be fun, but like physically scraping it off. And then if you want to mulch, I would not put any mulch over those tree roots. If you want to mulch, I would do a thin layer in between those roots. So what you really want to end up with is a big, not the classic, tree ring that's just what, 3 feet in diameter or something like that. I would say a larger area that you remove that, and then you could plant something like we talked about earlier, plant something on the perimeter of that ring that's not going to compete too much with the tree.
So like the tree is large, it's maybe, I don't know, from across the diameter, it's maybe like 20 feet. So how close up to the trunk?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, did you catch that?
No, sorry.
No, I think my system froze. So I was guessing that it's probably a silver maple or a red maple. And instead of a small just little area around it, I would bring that tree ring or the area under it out pretty large. And I would physically remove the turf grass and then mulch only in between the roots, because you don't want to cover tree roots. You want the tree to do all the things it needs to do.
Okay, so maybe like 3 feet away from the trunk, or
Oh, how big is the tree?
Said 20
well,
feet in
yeah,
diameter.
20,
Well, that
20
would
feet.
be, that's the canopy, right?
20,
That's
yeah,
20 feet
that's
wide.
how
like the
far the
drip.
branches.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, I would do a big circle, maybe a 10-foot diameter, something
Okay.
like that.
But then all the way up to the trunk.
Yeah, I would remove the turf and not damage those roots. That's the other thing. So
But not mulch up to that point.
no, you don't want mulch you don't want mulch touching the trunk, and you don't want mulch covering those roots at all. At all.
Okay. So, all right, that sounds good, but I can mulch up to that 10-foot area.
Yeah, I mean, you could mulch a bigger area if you wanted to. And actually, as the tree grows, you'll want to, because turf grass doesn't like shade. So you're going to notice a thin lawn, and you're going to be like, oh, the lawn looks really good every spring. but then as the season goes on, it'll be a losing battle. So
Yeah,
just know that, you know, that you might have to do that.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, by putting some flowering forbs underneath that would that's probably your best deal, and it really offers a lot of advantages to the pollinators and what have you, and those would take the semi-shade throughout the day.
100% agree. That's what I mentioned too when you couldn't hear me. I was talking to no one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, but again, no matter what you do, you're going to have to water that tree, because a non-native maple, they like water. They like water. So just be
having
aware
a
of that.
water-wise garden might not be
Well,
gonna happen.
if you put drought tolerant perennials or ground covers or whatever underneath, there will be less competition. Those plants will be better able to survive and not, you know, take away water that the tree needs. Whatever you do, the tree is going to need a lot of water. So I would use perennials like Al suggested, but ones that need less water.
And also the
And
water.
you lost me again.
The watering of the tree, you could just take a hose, for example, and let it run for a while so it soaks down. You need to water a maple tree deeper, any kind of tree, deeper than the herbaceous vegetation at the surface. That could just need frequent low amounts of water, whereas a tree needs infrequent high amounts of water down deep.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yep. So you could do drip line on the drought tolerant plants, and then do a hose maybe once a week on the tree or something like that.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And just move that hose around, you know, every other week or every week.
Yeah.
Because the roots go way out past the canopy.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
All right. Let's jump to our next one here. It's also from Sarah, and they have that little ditch there beside their fence. And what do you recommend to plant there to prevent erosion?
Sarah, my question, first of all, is that ditch on your property?
I don't know exactly the property line. Our property goes kind of into the ditch.
It's probably a county maintained ditch.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're gonna want to keep that ditch cleaned semi-regularly.
Yeah, we want it clean.
Drain.
It's flooded a couple times in the last 10 years.
Oh,
Yeah, we
What
have a
we're
ditch.
thinking of is kind of like right underneath the fence there. If you can kind of tell, the ditch is kind of bermed a little bit, about a foot past the fence. And we were thinking about doing a little bit bigger berm close to the fence, and then wanted to put something on it that would kind of hold it there.
so can you hear me? Okay, I've been frozen again. So I have a couple thoughts on that. So unlike the other scenario, you do want plants that are going to be rhizomatous and kind of fairly aggressive spreaders in the scenario to hold on to the soil. So I would suggest showing milkweed, goldenrod, and some of the grasses that and those are all like low maintenance plants. Let them get established, and it's a perimeter of the property, which is exactly where those plants should grow. And if they grow into the ditch, you know, maybe the county won't kill them. I don't know. So,
But if the county does come through and clean the ditch, they'll be fine.
Yes.
They just will get torn out of the bottom.
Yeah.
But they'll still have their root
We
system.
could keep it out of there. We just so that in one of the pictures you can see where it's kind of bermed up. The county has repaired that a couple times, because like last June when we had that big rain event, it took out a fair bit of that. So we're just trying to prevent that from happening again. So
Yeah.
we'd be more than happy to keep the ditch clean. We just want to keep the dirt there too.
I definitely second showy milkweed. That is its natural habitat,
Mhm.
growing along
Yep.
drainage just like that. I think it
Showy.
would thrive. Yeah.
And then I would recommend some, as Betsy had said, some rhizomatous or grasses such as Idaho fescue and blue bunch wheatgrass type of grasses out through there.
I'm having trouble with the
Oop, you froze up again, Betsy.
Well, okay, any other comments there before we move on to the next and get Betsy back? All right. And these are for Betsy. Of course. We'll skip those for the time being and jump over here. So Jean or Jeannie, when cleaning up your native plants, this is really kind of something that Betsy was talking about, but I'm sure you guys can jump in. But can you, what do you have to do with the seeds to really get them ready? Can you just throw them out there, and you got to store them away in the winter, or what do you have to do?
Yeah, you could certainly make them into seed balls. Most of the native flowers have cold, moist stratification requirements, which just means that they need to be exposed to cool, moist conditions to be able to germinate. So you're better off waiting till fall to put anything out in the landscape. You could just keep it inside in a shed over the summer, or you could even leave it out in the landscape. There's just a greater risk of loss to insects or rodents, etc. If you just leave the the seeds and vegetative matter out over the season. But yeah, fall is really the only time the vast majority of native flowers need to be seeded. So that would be my recommendation. Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of species that do great from seed. If you have penstemons, clipping those seed heads, you can get a lot of seed off of 1 or 2 stalks of penstemon. Blanket flower, lots of species. Lupin can be started very easily from seed. So yeah, it's definitely something that's very fun to experiment with, for sure.
And one way to kind of fool nature is you can take those seeds and stick them in your freezer before you to get the stratification on them, and then also, depending on the species, just taking and rubbing the seeds together a little bit and then scattering them will help. That's the scarification, if you will, on some of those seeds. So you break the seed shell.
Mel, are there any native plants that are more difficult to grow from seed?
Yeah, a lot of the shrubs, berry producing shrubs, are a little bit more challenging. They just need a little bit more seed treatment type. Nature works great when you've got birds that, the berries pass through the digestive tract and are digested and deposited. But to just clip berries and plant those in the ground doesn't work very well, because it takes so long for that berry to break down in the soil. So at the nursery, we blend up berries and separate that from the seed before seeding anything that's got kind of fleshy fruit on it. Yeah, and there's a few other species, orange globe mallow, like that scarification treatment that Al was talking about. We actually just soak them in really hot water for 30 seconds to kind of crack the seed coat. They've got a really hard seed before we sow them in the fall. So there's a few species like that, orange globe mallow, the globe mallow, checker mallows. Those are all species that need a little bit of extra help getting the seed coat kind of roughened up.
You know, but I'm glad you mentioned the mallows. They make some great covers, and they are very pretty colors too. Offer good variety.
Absolutely.
Well, I can read.
You're muted.
Kirk, you're
Kirk.
muted, yeah.
Go ahead, Mel.
You can read what I was just reading, and you already did, I'm sure. But yeah, any recommendations for the steep bank right up against the house and fire-wise, so you don't have brush coming up under the deck?
Well, yeah, you know what I see off in the upper part of the photo is that probably a good idea to do a little bit of thinning there to move those trees apart. And I think getting some grasses on the ground, if you will. Again, I'm guessing this is up in a little higher altitudes, if you will, than right down in the valley bottom. And one of my recommendations would be to get some Oregon grape, maybe started around down the base. It's a small plant that would do well. Again, I'm not sure what kind of grasses to plant there. I'm guessing this is it looks like it'd be, like I say, higher elevation and a mixed conifer type and a riparian. And so I would plant shrubs. Again, there's a number of different shrubs, the snowberry, the Oregon grape, kinnikinick. Those are the types of shrubs that they have low, and you can space them out about double their height apart, except for the kinnikinick. You could put that all over the place down there, and that would really do well for holding the bank.
Yeah.
Mel, you got some thoughts?
Yeah, I was gonna second kinnikinick. I think grass wise, I would be looking at Idaho fescue.
Oh yeah, there you
Blue
go.
bunch wheatgrass, two of the shorter species that would do well at that elevation. And yeah, maybe not tall Oregon grape, but
No,
low creeping Oregon grape, which only gets about 18 inches tall, would be, I think, what you would want to go with. Yeah, I would also try showy daisy, which is a pretty vigorous perennial. And I think it would do well in that kind of partial shade looking site. And it has a tendency to spread by seed, and so it could do a lot for bank stabilization as well.
And maybe spreading dogbane.
I was just gonna say, if Betsy was on the line, she would say spreading dogbane.
I'm on my phone. I don't know what's going on with the computer, but just, yeah, crazy. But I can see you. I'm
Welcome
allowed.
back.
Somebody in the chat mentioned tufted hairgrass. It's a little bit taller, but yeah, I would do great in a situation like that too. It generally likes a little bit more moisture than the fescue and blue bunch wheatgrass. That's naturally a riparian species, but if this site is high enough elevation, it could do pretty well there.
yeah, the tufted hairgrass, you might want to when it cures out, after it cures out, maybe just trim it down to about 4 inches, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to back up, Betsy. While you were gone, we had some questions specifically for you. So,
And I have answers. So I would say yes, it's okay to mix the low water non-natives with the natives. However, there's a couple caveats with that. What is considered drought tolerant in an area that gets 30 to 40 or more inches of rain a year is not necessarily drought tolerant here in the desert. So specifically like echinacea, it has a taproot, but it doesn't have a, North Central Washington grade taproot, so there's a difference in drought tolerance regionally. So that's so I would not like intermix them with the natives because they are definitely going to need some supplemental watering. And then as far as the attractiveness or disruption of the ecosystem, I will say that a species like Echinacea, for instance, is so broadly scattered across a good portion of the country that I would guess that there are some insects that also have very broad ranges, insects, butterflies, etc., that would use those. So I think there will be some success with native insects using those technically non-native species. And then the non-native, I would restrict to species that are native to the US or to the continental US, because when you start talking about species that are native to Asia or Europe, then that kind of tenuous link with, okay, there are probably populations of insects that do use this and they have a wide range, or migratory, like migratory birds. So I would restrict it in that sense, keeping it within the US. Does that make sense?
Lavender is a bee magnet, but if you ever get in close and look, they're all European honeybees.
Yeah, they're all honeybees.
So,
yeah.
So yeah, that's what you're providing habitat for in that situation.
Yeah, and like the catmint, which is a beautiful plant, but again, it's all honeybees, and the native bees don't go anywhere near it. And then the second part of your question on the, Jean, was that you with the seeds, right? Oh, that's later, but I'm going to address that. Did you guys talk about the seeds?
Yeah.
Okay. Because the only reason I wouldn't scatter them right away is because I have a really tiny yard, and I like to wait till the end of the season to see where I want to put things. And when you're scattering seeds as they come off the plants, birds will eat them, birds and insects will eat them, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So, and then the pest management in a native garden, did you talk about that?
We have not.
Okay, so my thought on that is I don't consider, other species so much as pests, except that you have to protect young trees will need to be protected. And if you're afraid of, like I have dogs, so if there were areas where I wanted to, let nature do its thing, and I think I talked about this, fence them so dogs can't get in. If there are rabbits or whatever in a certain area, I would fence it. You can use simple garden fence. So that's one answer. And then the other is that from my perspective, living in the city, my goal is to bring in more wildlife. I mean, we're not going to get, deer climbing over our 6-foot privacy fence in the back, but bring in other small animals. So I tend to be in the school of live with them. That's why, humans tend to think of this is my spot, but I'm kind of the opposite. I think we share our space with other species. So that's kind of my approach.
I agree with you, Betsy. Where I live right now, we have deer in our yard. Well, not this time of the year, but during the summer and fall. And we have lots of plants that they love. And so what we do in the fall is we fence them. We have little cyclone fences that we are not cyclone, but what is it? Chicken wire, I guess, that we put around them so that the deer don't rub on the young trees. And then take it off, in the winter, and don't put it back up until, again, when it's rutting season for the deer. And we're gonna get browsing on all our plants, and that's just the way life is. So that's what we do, is try to plant a number of them around so that there's a variety and lots of food on the smorgasbord, so that they don't overgraze on any one plant.
Yeah, I call it nature's pruning, right? Right out. Yeah,
that's right.
Thing. Yeah.
Changing attitude as opposed to changing the animal.
Right.
Well,
perspective.
Embracing cohabitation. Cats and dogs living together kind of scenario.
All right.
I think there's a hand up.
Go ahead. Mel, were you adding something?
No, there's a hand up.
Oh,
It was a
Uh,
mistake. I didn't mean to raise my hand.
okay.
One thing, if I could just add for cohabitating with small mammals and all that, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife does have resources on their website, some little tips and tricks on like how to discourage squirrels from climbing certain trees, you know, if you have a nuisance one there. So I can put those links in that, and they do have like conflict specialists you can talk to regarding that.
Conflict management.
Yeah.
Special mediators. Yes, that's good. That's a good resource, actually.
So can I call the Game and Fish, have them come up and tell my wife that I was right?
Depends on who you talk to.
I'm teasing.
Yeah. All right. This is, yes, starts out kind of as an owl point, but goes back to all of the rest of your talks too. But yeah, we live in this high wildfire area. Does that mean we don't put native in our front yard?
Not at all. In fact, the contrary is thinking about things down the road I just talked to some folks about this the other day, is the more native we are, the greater the diversity is, the greater the adaptive ability of those plants are. Because we're going to get big fluctuations in the weather, in case nobody's noticed that. And so we need to have stuff that's got good adaptability to it and maintain the diversity, if you will. Putting natives in your front yard, I mean, there is a vast variety of natives, you know, and whether you're in the sagebrush, the pine, or the mixed conifer forest, we got lots of natives that do well, and they're fire resistant plants, okay? And just keeping this stuff primarily up close to the house. We want to be looking at herbaceous perennials and annuals, ground covers, and short grasses. And that's an easy one. And then once we get out from there, there's almost no restrictions whatsoever with the natives once we get out beyond landscape zone 1. Growing in the Chelan Valley, is it different depending on lake effect? I'm not sure Lake Chelan's quite big enough to provide a lake effect. I lived in Chelan for 13 years, and you know, it's a desert. In fact, people often ask, how much higher is Stehekin than Chelan? Okay. And then the boat operator would say, I don't know, but he says, I've always burned my brakes out coming back from Stehekin to Chelan. So anyway, there is no big lake effect on Chelan. The only thing that's very evident at Chelan is the South Shore versus the North Shore. There is a drastic difference in vegetation type because of the aspect, and that is pretty important. And it's just a north aspect versus generally a north aspect versus generally a south aspect. As you know, the lake does move a little bit.
And I would
go ahead.
I would add to that, specifically the Lake Chelan. It's almost similar to the Wenatchee Leavenworth scenario, where we're talking zone 7, hardiness zone 7 on the south end, I think. And then I would not be at all surprised if it's zone 5, the further north you go on the lake. So
Well,
that
actually it's east and west.
Yeah, up the lake, I'll call it. So the hardiness will be the big factor in that. And again, the clue is always look at the native vegetation and let that drive your decisions, right? And then I'm gonna again second you on the totally native front lawn. I don't have a front lawn. Our front yard is almost at this point completely native. It's still a work in progress, but it's so much easier to take care of than a lawn. And if you're concerned about the fire issues, then I would say what you do is with the grasses specifically, right? A drink of water in the hottest seasons every couple weeks. If you feel like you don't want them to go dormant, a drink of water can make all the difference in the world. So
yeah, just to add to Betsy's comment, there is blue bunch wheatgrass, Idaho fescue, Sandberg bluegrass. trying to think. But anyway, most of the native grasses that we have around here, they cure out during the summer. But if you just add a glass of water to them about every 2 weeks, they'll stay green until till they frost.
All right. It's right at 8 o'clock. We've got 3 more slides, so let's jump on over to those. Don't wanna. So this is specifically for Liz, and you were talking about the globe mallow in your talk. So.
Yeah, so for the globe mallow, what we found through the Heritage Garden program is when you provide excess water, you overwater this particular plant, it tends to have, you start to see excessive growth. And so that excessive growth will cause it to fall over. And then it becomes susceptible to black spot or mildew. So if you're finding that you're seeing a lot of excess growth on it, if you happen to plant it, just cut back on the watering. You could also cut off the old stalks to prevent that collapse and maybe encourage extending your bloom time for it. But typically we'll see this more with the native plants too, or sorry, the native grasses if you're providing excess water. And so you had brought up snow buckwheat, and I guess my recommendation for that, I mean, if Sandra, if you're the one who has like that 1 to 2 hours of sun, it's probably not getting enough sun. So you could try planting a snow buckwheat in a different location and see how that one fares. Or yeah, another trick is maybe checking the soil moisture content. So you want to make sure that like a weak ball is forming in your hand. And so I can provide a little reference from USDA on what to look for in your moisture content there. Yeah, so those are kind of my thoughts. So really checking the draining capacity of the soil, and then maybe considering trialing another snow buckwheat and planting it in more full sun. Any other suggestions from the panel?
I would say, I would second that, in that after they're established, particularly the buckwheats, the really drought tolerant plants, they do not want extra water.
Right.
My snow buckwheat got water the first season and then not since. And they are thriving and producing seedlings and all that good stuff. They look great. So that's what you have to remember. They are not a non-native species that needs water. They are completely adapted to these conditions. And I have sandy soil, very sandy soil. It doesn't hold any moisture, and they just absolutely love it.
And another thought too is, where does the snow fall off your roof? Like, is it accumulating in that spot and crushing the plant? It might be just too harsh conditions for where it's located.
Sandra, do you want to ask any follow-up on that?
No, thank you. That's great. And you're right. The buckwheat I'm talking about is where the snow falls off the roof. So maybe it is both kind of mechanical damage plus too much water plus not enough sun.
The number one issue with the Master Gardener Plant Clinic in most plants that are brought in for diagnosis is too much water. That's the number one issue.
All right. Okay, moving on. From Sarah, so what do they plant? What should they do under those pine trees?
So my first thought is to limb them up and maybe plant kinnikinick on the edges. I think we talked about this very similarly, right? So yeah, that way they'll get a little bit of sunlight down there.
If we
Hey, one of the things. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, if we trim it up and clean it out under there, in the last session, Al, you were recommending, what was that? Is it scoria, the red rock?
Yes.
As sort of is there any harm to using that underneath those trees?
Not a bit.
Okay.
is one of the things, those trees, it looks like they're spruce and it looks like some type of a juniper back there. And those would help them out a lot. In fact, from a fire-wise standpoint, if you open up that spruce and look at it, you'll see a lot of dead needles hanging in and around the branches where they just, when they drop off, they get hung up inside there. So if you can, I would recommend. Now, do you want that part for a cover? It looks like it's close to the road. Is that the road or
It's
just
right around, it's right on the road. Yeah. And we want to trim them up and clean it up and just make it easy to maintain. So you're thinking that scoria might be a good option.
Yeah, and that would hold the moisture in. And what you can do, you don't want to prune those up too high because you want to maintain the noise, have those absorb the noise of the vehicles
Oh, sure.
going by.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I would normally recommend pruning those up about 30% of the tree, but I wouldn't go that high on these, and just prune them up, maybe 3-4 feet, something like that, and get some scoria underneath there, and then wash them out.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
You bet.
All right. So this is our last question. So what do you do for weeds? 5 acres. Can you handle that?
Yeah, so my first question is, are they in Chelan County?
Yeah, I don't know who sent this in. If anybody sent this in is on the call, jump in and tell us a little more.
Because if you're in Chelan County, I would say contact the weed board and have them kind of walk you through the weed control process. And aside from that, the issue with bare soil is there's no competition to the weeds. So it might be a case where you want to seed those, whether it's seeding grasses or seeding perennials or seeding some reseeding annuals to begin to reclaim that area from the weeds without knowing, too much about it. But weed control, the weed board is the answer for that, for sure.
Yeah, I would second that. If you know that you're going to be disturbing some land, have your seed mix ready to go. And as it's disturbed, ideally in the fall, get the seed down and rake it in, and you'll have a lot more competition for the weeds the next growing season.
Good point.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Is I just add to that is the weeds are growing there because there's a little niche that allows them to grow. There's a vacant space and they're trying to fill it. And so if you take a weed out, you have to replace it with something desirable. And so you have to fill the niche. In weed management, killing the weed is only half the job. Now you need to fill that niche so nothing else is going to jump back in there.
And what a lot of people don't realize is that the weed bank, which is the weed seeds that are in your soil, they can be a scary amount, and they can have really, really long, they can live a long time. They can be viable for a long time. So if you think, oh, it was clean, but some of those weed seeds can live for decades. So as long as there's sunshine and water, which is what they need to germinate and grow, they're going to take advantage of that bare soil.
Yeah, this, sorry, just to add to that too. Yeah, that sounds a lot like what the farmers and the dryland parts of the county, not necessarily Chelan, but Douglas, Okanagan, Grant, those areas. So they take a marginal cropland and convert it to these native habitats to help soil health and also provide pollinator habitats, wildlife habitat. And some of those, some of the fields have taken at least 10, 15 years to really see that change and have that native plant. So a lot of patience is needed and persistence. And then annual scouting to make sure none of those like Class A weeds are sprouting up and just take care of those small patches through spot spraying. But definitely the noxious weed board could help you out with that. But yeah, just a lot of persistence, and eventually those native plants will outcompete those weeds.
As a question, Amanda or Kirk, do you know, does South Douglas County Conservation District, I think they offer advice on weeds, don't they?
They definitely have a booklet on the noxious weeds of Douglas County. Yeah, South Douglas. South Douglas Conservation District definitely has information. I don't know what service they do. Liz, you probably know.
Yeah, I don't believe they have anyone who's certified, like with an applicator license to make those recommendations. Cascadia actually has 2 on staff. But yeah, start with the noxious weed board, I would say. And in Douglas County, because they don't have a noxious weed board, they do have a cooperative weed management.
Yes.
And I believe it'd be WSU Extension you want to talk to first about that, or Foster Creek Conservation District.
Great.
And we put a link into the noxious weed board of Chelan County, and then Amanda just put the one in for South Douglas CD. That's all the questions we've had submitted. Does anybody else have any questions that's out there? Feel free to put it in the chat or just unmute and ask. All right. Well, I guess that's all for the evening then.
I actually have 2 questions.
Oh.
If we have time. My first one would be, if someone wanted to collect seeds, what is the process? Do you need permits? Yeah, what would you recommend if they don't have any on their own property but wanted to collect and try growing from seed?
So my first, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't, I'm only, familiar with a commercial scale collection of seed, somebody wandering around and clipping a few seed heads. I don't know what sort of permitting would be needed for that. Any seed collecting I do on public land is permitted through the various agencies. U.S. Forest Service and WDFW are ones that I'm familiar with the permitting process on. I know BLM does it as well.
Yes.
But yeah, whether the small scale landowner clipping seed heads off, I'm not sure if there's some sort of exemption for that or not. I suspect that, nobody would want to go to the effort of issuing a permit for that, but they might have to call in to the local office and ask, see what they say.
Yeah, I think that would be the safest thing to do is having worked both for the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. Most of the time you can get a permit. I don't know what it is today, but if you call, you can get a minor collection permit.
The other thing you can do is have friends or, neighbors, friends with undisturbed property, and obviously harvest some seeds from them.
Ideas. Great. Thank you. And then my last question or second question would be drain fields. Any recommendations planning on drain fields? I can't remember if you guys cover that in previous weeks.
Septic drain field?
Yes.
Yeah. So I actually did one. I designed one that's in Dryden, that BJ shell there. So that area that's behind the concrete barriers behind the gas pumps. So this is the shell station that's just before their turnoff to Blewett Pass. And I just designed a native garden with perennials and grasses. So my kind of rule of thumb is, because if you read up on it, anything but trees and shrubs is probably okay. So you don't have to restrict yourself to just turf. But it probably depends on the field. But in general, they're designed so that plant roots can go down in there without interrupting the process.
Okay.
And that is the reason why you'd want herbaceous vegetation on
Yeah.
those grasses and the various types of forbs, and not roots of trees and shrubs.
Yeah.
Maybe bulbs too, like nodding onion. Would that be an option as well?
What was that?
Bulbs. As
Oh,
well.
yeah.
Okay.
There's one right out here that's got lots of natives on it that I put in my house here when I put in my septic system.
Yeah, there's no reason aside from, this is the way things always have been, that people plant lawns over them. I mean, that's really the only reason.
Right. Okay.
Is yeah, the idea today is it used to be to try to get septic systems to discharge into the soil. Now you want to bring that material, the waters and what have you, up to the surface and evaporate it.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that'd be it.
Okay, let's try that again. Now that I'm unmuted. Thank you all so very much. I really appreciate all of the sessions you've done, and tonight's Q&A. Awesome. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure other people have too. And all the participants, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for
Thank
joining.
you.
Second,
Yay!
everything Kirk said.
It's been
Thanks, everyone.
great.
Panelists and participants.
Thank
We'll
you.
get all these resources up on Cascadia's website, and then Kirk will send out the link to everyone.
Okay, and I'll see you guys in May. Those
Yeah.
of you who
Sounds
make
good.
it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that'll be super
Earth Day.
fun. Oh, it is?
Oh, is that what? Wait,
No,
is that what you're
Nice.
talking about in May?
The tour. Kirk, go get some rest.
Yeah, I know.
Good night.
Sorry.
Now we
Good night,
know.
Good all. Good job, you guys.
Good night.
Bye. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.